Welcome to the Arena Decklist Podcast. I'm Jerry Thompson. Here with me is Brian Gottlieb. And dude, it's week one standard time. Are you excited?
So excited. Obviously, we're still trying to figure out what is possible in this metagame. And, you know, we're still waiting to get a chance to do our first pass through, our first games with Zendikar Rising when it releases this Friday, right? 2 days from today is when it finally releases.
I don't even know.
I think that's accurate. So obviously we know nothing about it and just a world of mystery and possibility that we're all going to get to explore soon.
Or, now hear me out. We have not had any sizable tournament data, and yet we have a very likely BNR announcement on Monday.
Okay.
Does that sound right?
Sure. Why not? Why anything's possible in 2020. So yeah, let's do it that way instead. We'll just get ahead of this one and do some bannings now, since that's just what we do in every format, and they were coming eventually. So, I mean, I guess if you listened to last week's podcast, you know that I kind of like this decision, but wow, is it crazy and unexpected, and I don't know what to really make of it.
Yeah. So at Wizards_Magic, the official Magic Twitter account, tweeted, "We're closely monitoring developments in Standard. In order to avoid disrupting this weekend's tournaments, we intend to provide an update on the format early next week." That reads to me like Monday or so, they are going to ban something.
Right. But we don't even know that, quite frankly. Like, usually it's been a little bit clearer in the past when it's time for a BNR update.
True. I don't know, but they say, like, in order to avoid disrupting the tournaments. Like, that leads me to believe that they are going to take action. And it also leads me to believe that they were willing to take action immediately, but knew that, like, people had a tournament to play in 2 days later. They're just like, it is so bad that 5 days after the set is out on Arena, we see that things have just gone to hell. And even in, like, granted, like the Oko days, like maybe they're a little bit more reluctant to pull the ban hammer or whatever, but like, what are the win rates like on these Omnath decks?
I don't think it matters. I really don't. Like, I posited on Twitter that I don't think Standard's problems are about balance. Not to say I don't believe the Omnath decks are the best decks, or that they're definitely incredibly adaptable. They can respond to anything. And if nothing was ever touched in the Omnath deck, it would have been either the best or one of the best decks in Standard throughout its entire time in the format, indisputably. But I don't think this is an issue solely focused around win rates. I think it's about playstyle. And we've done this. We've done the ramp thing. We've done it to death over the past year. There's obviously some disconnect when it comes to appropriately costing these cards and designing cards that put you ahead on mana, because we did it with Wilderness Reclamation, we did it with Flyers, we did it with Uro, we did it with Omnath, just over and over and over. The same problem keeps compounding, and people are sick of it, and you can't make them do it again. Whether you believe that this metagame can eventually be balanced out through the printed cards, I think you need to do this, and I think you need to do it now. So it feels weird to applaud this decision, because obviously we all just want normal Magic. We want to get back to like the way we used to engage with this stuff. But at the same time, it's like, I didn't want to do this. I was already over it. Like, I was mentally checking out of Standard at this point already. And so if that is not only my sentiment, but the sentiment of the larger player base, then I'm going to give props for acting on it. But unquestionably, the leash to make this same mistake is gone at this point. Something has to change with the approach to how these cards are being designed.
Yeah, I mean, part of the problem is that there's like a year of lag, right?
Right. That's a huge problem. And you have to feel, I mean, maybe you don't. I do. I think I'm like a generally empathetic person, but I feel for the people who were involved with designing the cards, and like,
Whoa.
I know that's crazy.
You're saying that humans design these cards?
That is what happens, according to...
Not Robo Rosewater? I thought Robo Rosewater made all the cards.
According to my sources, the humans haven't all been replaced yet. And you get the sense that, like, as they started to accept and learn from their mistakes about cards like Fires and Wilderness Reclamation, they had to just be like sitting there thinking in the back of their minds, like, this Omnath card right around the corner, and there's kind of a lot of similarity here. And to say nothing of the similarities between Omnath and Uro, I mentioned in my article this week that Omnath to me feels like the combination of Fires of Invention / Wilderness Reclamation plus Uro. I think it actually does both of those things that have been problematic. So I have to imagine they were sweating the release of this card. And then the data probably bears out that it's a problem, but I don't think it's the whole story.
No, it's not. It's not as simple as like, oh, ban one card and move on. You know, it's funny. Like Tolarian Academy, for example, is one of those things that you just look at and you're like, okay, that was really bad. That was a mistake. You know, we should not do stuff like that anymore. And now it's a little bit more complicated because it's not just like, oh, you know, this one card is like generating all the mana or whatever. It's a combination of things where you are spending mana to accelerate, to ramp you so that you have further mana on later turns. And it's like, oh yeah, that kind of stinks. You know, you're spending mana not to accomplish anything on the battlefield right now. What if we tack on like some life gain to it so it doesn't feel as bad? And it's like, that's a cool idea, but then it just means that you're accelerating and not really paying a cost because whatever your opponent is attacking you for, you're just gaining it right back. It's effectively a time walk at that point. And then there's just a huge plethora of various ramp effects. And then there's stuff like Lotus Cobra, where you're just generating like more and more mana. And Escape to the Wilds is also like another problematic thing where you get to just gas up after you've expended all of your cards to accelerate you and stuff. It's just this perfect storm of nonsense. You know, like you can even Genesis Ultimatum into like Terror of the Peaks and Beanstalk Giant to like kill people immediately, you know? It's nonsense.
Yeah, when you list it all out, it's just this really bad confluence of effects that can't be part of a successful standard. And if I got to take charge of the situation, there's some safety valves that I would look to install at this point. And there's just some things I'm not touching for a while.
Confounding Conundrum, is that the safety valve you would install?
No. It's not about printing safety valves. It's about setting some clear delineations of what we can and cannot get away with. And things like life gain tacked onto ramp, that doesn't work because you're invalidating one of the typical weaknesses of ramp. You spend your early game getting to development, and then you use these huge, powerful spells to try and undo the work your opponent has already accomplished. Well, Uro and Omnath are just skipping that phase of the game, and they're recovering you on their own and delivering ramp. So that doesn't work. You've taken away a traditional weakness of ramp. Then you can say, well, you challenge them on their ramp axis. So I will kill all of your ramp creatures. I will counter your ramp spells. And then I can eventually pull ahead with card advantage in the late game. That's the way we've responded to ramp decks in the past. Well, you can't do that because of Uro. So you either counter Uro, deny their ramp early, but then they get paid later on and you're falling behind on that card advantage axis, or you let it go and you're immediately losing that mana battle. And they have this threat just sitting there for the late game. You can't kill all the mana creatures because, like you said, they're full of reloads. They have Genesis Ultimatum as a draw 5. They have Escape to the Wilds as a draw 5. They have Uro, which will draw however many cards it wants. So there's no real attrition-based strategies that can ever work against them. It's just bad. And you need some checks to make sure that no matter what path you're going down, you have to leave weaknesses for it. And I think the two biggest offenders of erasing weaknesses here are Uro and Omnath. I think you could do Lotus Cobra stuff and have it be acceptable. And look, maybe you shouldn't. I went on Twitter and said, I would ban 6 cards because I think there's a design flaw here. And there's too much explosiveness in standard, and you need to get some of it out. So I listed Embercleave, Lucky Clover, Lotus Cobra, Uro, Omnath, and I'm missing one. What was my last card? I want it gone.
Escape?
I don't think it was Escape.
Oh, Winota.
Thank you. So just these things that basically invalidate everything that happened before they entered the battlefield. Now these cards have taken over the game. No matter what work you have done to this point, it's just about this thing. And the game is over. Or maybe it extends a few more turns, but the snowball has happened. I do think, though, Escape merits consideration as well for just being way too consistent of a reload and having a role in multiple of these really powerful engine decks.
It's funny too, like Escape saw some play last season, a little bit, but for the most part, it was overshadowed by all of the other things that, generated mana, gave you card advantage, right? Like even towards the end of the season, we had Nissa Crisis as this thing that was better than everything else. And now you're starting to see that like, oh, this card is actually just very good too. There was just so much stuff in this space last season, it just didn't matter. It was like the 10th best thing you could be doing.
Yeah, I think it also combines very well with the designs in Zendikar Rising. Like, obviously, the double-faced cards are quite good with Escape to the Wilds as ways to consistently get the mana boost from it. And
Landfall,
they can
too.
also Landfall, they get mana sinks. So there's just a bunch of synergies that really have pushed that card to the next level. I don't know, man. I don't know what's going to happen on Monday. How about I give you the Wizards of the Coast hat now? Congratulations. You're very rich and you make a bunch of money off Magic. And you also now have this difficult decision of how to set this format up for success. What are you doing?
Are you talking about like individual employees making a lot of money from Wizards? Because I don't think
No. I'm talking about the company, not individual employees.
I mean the company is probably just being like, do whatever you can to quell the masses. Mm-hmm. And then you let the people whose job it is make those decisions to actually make those decisions. But like we mentioned, I don't think it is so much as just like this one card is the issue. And yes, this is a ramp deck, and yes, Uro is in it, but I think if you only remove Uro from the equation, it changes very little.
Agree 100%. I think that's the ban everyone is expecting, though, when it comes to Monday.
I would riot, because that will just not do anything.
Well, look, this is why I'm on the 6-ban plan. I don't think you can afford to again do a half measure and still have this problem present.
I think that if you are able to get rid of the ramp strats and get it to a place where like aggro is prevalent, then decks can actually play interaction removal spells, and things like Embercleave will matter less. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, and especially like things like Lucky Clover. It's like when you're getting to the point where you're just like, I have to ban Lucky Clover. It's like, I don't know, man. Like at that point, there's going to be some other thing that is like, maybe not as good as it, but there's always going to be something that is the next best down the line, right?
Sure.
So
yeah, you got to draw the line somewhere.
I am fine with take whatever stance you need to ensure that these ramp decks that just don't have to play any interaction, really. I mean, they are now because of Lotus Cobra Mirrors, but having all the life gain tacked onto the ramp cards is the vast majority of the problem. And if you remove Uro, that's not enough. If you remove Omnath by itself, that might be enough. I think if you remove both of them, then it's fine.
That's a big swing. 2 mythic rares,
I know,
kind of headline cards of the set, and you have to think. I think if they believe that is the correct way to do it, they will do it. I mean, they kind of proved that with Oko. I didn't think they would ban Oko. I kind of said, this is the face of Throne of Eldraine. It seems like they're incentivized to keep it around. And maybe that's why it lasted as long as it did.
Yeah.
But still, ultimately, they did the right thing and got rid of it. So this would be an aggressive move.
I thought they would ban Gilded Goose before Oko, It's
yeah,
like,
no,
we have to keep the mythic. How else are we going to sell packs?
Right. But to their credit, they took the tough route. They banned the card that was really the cause of the problem. And now I think they're facing that point again. I think if you were prioritizing avoiding that decision, I think you could go Uro, Escape to the Wilds, Genesis Ultimatum, and then at least shape the existing Omnath deck towards something that isn't super resilient. And I think it would still probably be a very good deck, and Omnath would still be a very good card. It just won't, there'll be axes on which to challenge it. Like I could beat that deck. I've been close to beating the Omnath decks, but like the fact that sometimes they just get me with Escape to the Wilds, it's like, okay, they have too much. I can't answer every single possible plan they have. And the fact that they have an instant I win button in Genesis Ultimatum, again, I can't answer everything they're going to do. So there has to be some mitigation of their late game. But I think I agree with you. The cleanest thing to do is just take both of these cards and cut them down to their base, because the idea of ramp plus life gain it squeezes way too much of the format, and it just creates a deck building challenge that I don't think can be answered with the present cards.
Yeah, I think there is a route you could take where you're like, oh, let's try and get rid of the top end, and you just remove ultimatum and escape. That's one of the things that I thought about too. But
we've seen that flaw before, though, right? Like, it's going after the enablers, right? Going after the payoffs as opposed to the enablers, and we always criticize when that's what's being done.
Yeah, because there's going to be some 7-mana card in the next set, or there's like a 7-mana card right now.
Amiria's Call is there. Like, it's flashy to kill you, but if like on turn 4 I'm playing a bunch of 4/4s, I can probably beat you that way too.
Right. Yeah, and even then it's just like, okay, well, what about Omnath into Elspeth Conquers Death and Shark Typhoon and stuff like that? It's like, is that even... I mean, it's worse, obviously, right? But it's like, it's still going to be pretty tough to beat no matter what. And a lot of the problems are just like the ramp plus life gain. So, yeah, I think you basically have to take action against Omnath in order to have any significant effect.
Janelle was right. That's all I have to say.
Apparently.
She looked at it seriously for like 10 seconds, read the text, looked up at me. That's going to be banned. I think she's right.
Didn't take long either. If you talked to her about this at all, like, does she know what's going on?
Yeah, she's thrilled about it.
Yeah,
she's ready to take over for me on the podcast, basically.
Awesome. Yeah. Dude, I'd be down to have her on.
Oh, for sure. Definitely way better than me.
What else? I mean, like, I will say that in the first couple days of playing on the ladder, after Arena finally let me actually play on the ladder, I went from like nothing to diamond very quickly. I think I lost 2 matches. And since being in like high diamonds, it has been more difficult to win with the ramp deck. I'm winning at like a 60% clip instead of a 90% clip or whatever. So there is that. But
you're also what everyone is focusing on at the moment, and you're still popping off at 60%. So
they're trying real hard. A lot of main deck confounding conundrums and things like that. Where it's just like, okay, this is kind of annoying, but I'll just pick up all my lands and kill you. It's fine.
Yep. Yeah, it just goes back to the same thing. Like, this is not the game we have been looking forward to as we waited with bated breath for rotation. And you got to give the payoff of something new, something different. You can't ask people to go through this again. So it's just not a relevant data point to me. I don't care how much the deck is winning. It's completely irrelevant. It goes back to like the Etherworks Marvel thing. Like, don't tell me the win rate. People don't want to play against this. That's what matters. And going back to before there were bans in Pioneer and the format was abandoned. And it's like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you have like a good theoretical basis for this. If people aren't engaging with the game and they're not happy, then you have to do something. But I guess I want to get into this now too. It's a weird time to transition to this point.
Nah, hit me. Let's do it.
Does it matter if you and I are enjoying this game anymore? Does it actually matter?
I don't think we're the target audience.
No, we're not. And that's what it comes down to. It's like, if you're selling a ton of Magic cards, making cards like this, and all these people who have come to Arena are just loving it and giving you money hand over fist.
Well, the thing is that I don't think, like, if this is the best deck, right? And it's like frustrating to play against because it's really hard to beat and it takes up a sizable metagame share. There are a lot of people out there who want a variable play experience. They want to play against different decks every round. And this is not going to give it to them. I think that Arena, to some extent, is going to be making a bunch of money no matter what. It is a money tree. And you're going to be able to sell packs with cards like Omnath to people who are playing Commander or older formats. I mean, we're going to talk about Modern eventually at some point, and the card is seeing play there, right? So, like, they're going to make money, but I think you can make money while also trying to massage the standard format a little bit and make it enjoyable.
Okay. That bridges well to my next question. And I think a lot of the assumption around these cards is that they are designed for players of a different ilk than you and I. The people who enjoy kitchen table Magic, the people who are playing a lot of Commander, those type of formats. Do cards designed for those people actually need to be this good? Like, do they benefit from pushing really hard? I know there's an impact on a less experienced, non-competitive player when they see a 2-mana 6/6 like Croxo. We'll use the softer example here. We won't even talk about Uro. I know that matters to them. And there is some effect on them where they're just jaw dropped, excited to play with the card. But like, if Kroxa cost, if you add 1 mana to all of the costs, so it's, 5 to escape and then 3 to cast, are they not excited anymore? Like, is that card irrelevant to them? And if you do the same to Uro, are they not excited about Uro? Like, how good do cards actually have to be to appeal to that audience?
No, it's a good question. I mean, for Kroxa and Uro, it's a lot easier to answer, at least from my point of view, where they're doing very unique things. So there's not really a precedent for how much that thing costs, or what is the average cost for a thing like that exists in your commander deck or whatever already, right? Like if you're printing a bunch of strictly worses than older cards, that's not very exciting to me. Even if it's like, oh, you could really use like this 5th copy of that effect in your deck, right? People are they're gonna put it in their deck, right? But they're not gonna like rush out to the store and like buy it, and they're not gonna buy like the foil alternate art full frame whatever version, probably.
Right.
But yeah, for Kroxa and Uro specifically, when maybe these cards aren't spawning new archetypes or whatever, but there's definitely a lot to think about where it's like, okay, say Kroxa, for example, it's like you have this discard theme type of thing, and it's like a Rakdos commander, like that's sort of like new space and interesting, or just giving you a reason to play Rakdos in general, and then it puts this body into play for a short period of time. Is there anything that this can trigger off of? Like you can sack them to Witch's Oven or whatever. Like there's a lot of cool things that you can do with these cards because they're unique, and I think that gets people excited as long as Kroxa didn't cost 6 or whatever, right? If it's somewhat aggressively costed, then cool, but those cards were very clearly costed to get into Constructed, and I don't know. I mean, maybe you're banking on those cards hitting Constructed. Maybe you want them to hit Constructed. You want some amount of escape to hit Constructed, right?
Yeah.
It's weird to me. Like, there's a lot of things to think about, but to answer your question specifically, those cards could be worse and they would still be exciting, I'm pretty sure.
I think so. And that's a really easy example because they're big bodies. But like, I think the same argument applies to cards like Fires of Invention and Wilderness Reclamation. It doesn't feel to me like a bunch of cards that have been problematic lately have been off by 1 mana. It feels like they're off by 2 mana. And that means there's like this wiggle room that we have access to where we could be a little bit more conservative and not take these chances and still make meaningful cards that people will get interested in, that don't just completely warp things and completely take over formats.
I think 5 is probably fine for a lot of these things. I mean, Fires specifically is kind of silly because like you play Fires on 4 and another spell, and then on turn 5 you get to play 2 5-drops, or like Cavalier and then find another 5-drop and play that, right? But if you change it to 5 mana, you're still single spelling on turn 4 and basically single spelling on turn 5. So it changes the fundamentals of how that deck plays out by a lot. And that's that specific example. But like Wilderness Reclamation is kind of the same thing, and also you're giving your opponent an extra turn to either, set up, maybe play out some extra creatures, or play a card drawing spell to look for the answer to your Fires or Wilderness Reclamation that's coming down the next turn. But just like turn 4 is so quick, and especially, Wilderness Reclamation at Growth Spiral, Omnath has Lotus Cobra and a bunch of other accelerants. It's just, it's so soon. You're telling me that I play like my 1-drop in my Grizzly Bear and you have like a Cobra and an Omnath? Like, how are you winning that game?
You're usually not, is the answer to that question.
Right.
I think the long-term thing that has to happen is you need to consider a lot of where things went wrong during this period. And a lot of it is just like the typical free mana. We tried it again for some reason. You can't do it. It doesn't work. It breaks Magic almost every time. But if you're going to take shots and like you, for some reason, think that you have the equation figured out this time, just do it more safely. And I think you have the cushion to still try and do inventive, creative things that get people excited and not necessarily bury every standard format under them. And it's not going to be like a popular stance, but I feel bad for Wizards in this scenario because so much of this set is so cool. Like you and I were over the moon in preview season. We had lots of decks to build.
I still like
really
the set.
excited. Yeah, abstractly I do, but like as it relates to the standard format, obviously it has not delivered what I hoped for. And it's a shame because there's all this really cool stuff going on below the surface. My hope is that we can take an aggressive line here to unlock all of that stuff, expose the good work being done, and then take some steps going forward to try and avoid having to do this week 1 cleanup ever again.
This is the best Zendikar set, I'm pretty sure.
It seems great. There's so many cool tribal things, the double face cards. I mean, I'll just tell you as far as a limited format, and we always do this early on in the limited format, but I really think it's true this time. It feels like an all-timer. I like a lot of the mechanics here. I think Party's an awesome limited mechanic, maybe my favorite. The double face tap cards are awesome for a limited environment, and I'm just having tons of fun playing the games. They play out the way that when I think of Magic, that's what the Zendikar Rising limited games feel like. It's little exchanges, timing your spells appropriately, getting small advantages, making decisions that compound throughout the game that you have to think about very carefully. All the stuff I really love is all present in this set from a limited perspective. And then, like I said, just from a creative perspective, there was tons of things I wanted to do when it came to building decks in Standard. They just got dwarfed by the power of Omnath, Uro, Escape, maybe Lucky Clover, maybe Embercleave, who knows? A lot of powerful stuff out there.
Dude, can you imagine playing like Once Upon a Time to find your Cobra, Omnath, or Fabled Passage?
Jerry, there's so many cards that are supposed to still be here. Like that's what's really jaw-dropping.
Also have Omnath alongside Oko. Like what a great format this would be.
No. I mean, I guess Oko answers Omnath and Lotus Cobra.
I mean, right? Not really, right? Like Omnath still gave you a card and you have a 3/3 left. I mean,
yeah, and you get the 4 damage to Planeswalkers. Maybe I don't know. It's actually unfathomable. Like the world we're supposed to be living in, there's just some of the most powerful Magic cards ever made. And even after loads of bans, we're still dealing with a format that feels unsustainable long term.
Dude, on your Genesis Ultimatum turn, you could just like elk all their stuff after you cast like 3 Genesis Ultimatums.
Please stop. I can't even think about it.
It would be such
Can't
gas.
even consider it. No, not gas.
Oh man, I would have to play Urian because there'd be too many good cards.
Right, you can never choose them all. I guess we'd still be doing Fires of Invention plus Omnath stuff too, so who knows how good that is.
I mean, 4/4 ETB draw card is good, but like how good is doubling your mana when you have fires? You can only play 2 spells.
Okay, yeah, maybe that's the first strike against it. I mean, you could still use your mana, right? Like you could still cast your Genesis Ultimatum if that's where you're still topping off.
What it realistically does is probably make it so you have 2 fires in your deck. You have like two mana engines, so you get the redundancy. That's probably more realistic.
That doesn't sound good.
Or no, because then you play Shark Typhoon too, and then you can like just Omnath into giant shark.
Oh, let's stop. I'm getting like cold sweats right now thinking about this format.
It sounds like a great format. Let's do that.
No,
I'm pretty sure that's what Pioneer looks like actually. So,
well, you might be right, and if it doesn't right now, it's on its way there.
It is on its way. I did a little bit of a look-see in, and the Omnath decks in Pioneer have Gross Spiral and Agent of Treachery.
Yep. Yeah, we might not be done dealing with Omnath's Wrath across multiple formats. It looks quite strong in Pioneer.
Well, I mean, to be fair, the farther back you go, like the older formats have better aggressive decks and better disruptive tools and stuff like that. And we're trying to get by with rogues in Standard currently.
Yeah.
Which,
Agonizing Remorse.
Yeah,
My kingdom for Thoughtseize, please.
Right. And it's close. It's still close to being viable or whatever, but I think older formats, they have more of a shot to actually dealing with it. But
fair enough.
We'll see. Anyway, we could talk about Modern, I guess.
Yeah, our plan was to come back and talk Standard. We wanted to do like the new Magic Arena deck dump. As far as I can tell, that has not happened yet.
Yeah, I looked.
Even if it did, it's like kind of a dead format. So I don't think that was the right thing to do. So we're going to head to Modern for the first time in a while.
Yeah, I like how they're like, we're going to do this deck dump. And then it's like, better not release that data. Better not post those deck lists.
Yeah, we'll try again. We'll try again next week. We'll look back at that.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. All right, so we have a Modern League from Magic Online dated September 22nd is when these lists went up, and a lot of Zendikar cards showed up in Modern, and it's really cool.
I agree. They're doing neat stuff. I also think it's really cool that the Magic Online decklist site continues to be broken.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, they have done the fine work of highlighting all the new cards that are appearing in these decks. They fall under other, as opposed to just like actually being put in the right columns of creature, land, instant, artifact, whatever. So we immediately know which of these decks contain new cards. And I think that's all we're going to talk about today. We're just going to skip the stuff that's built with the old cards and talk about the new cool stuff that we have happening.
Yeah, the sideboard doesn't do that, so we might miss decks that only have cards in the sideboard. But
right.
Yeah, basically it's putting them under other because they're not in the database yet or something, because normally when you hover over a card, it shows you the image, and they just don't recognize them as Magic cards. So.
Yeah, weird little problem. But like I said, I think it's one that ultimately makes our job a little bit easier this week.
Yeah. So. The Blind Squirrel?
Yeah, I'll take it.
Cool. First up, we have Lucky Strike. These are all 5-0 deck lists, and they are playing green-white taxes with 2 Skyclave Apparitions and 2 Archon of Emeria. Skyclave Apparition, definitely a card that we thought had more of a chance to go into Pioneer and Modern, mostly because the spirit creature type is a little bit more well-supported there. But in this case, doing normal Leonin Arbiter, Flicker Wisp stuff with that card.
Skyclave Apparition, actually one of the big winners, I think, in this deck dump. It's something we're going to come across
a
bunch of times. But I like Archon of Emeria too. Actually, if we want to just dip back into Standard real quickly, when I was trying to come up with ways to start challenging these Omnath decks, Archon was a card I was really interested in. And I think it had potential as a way to slow down their preposterous things that they could do. Obviously, they have outs to everything. Like, they can always find a way around it. But it seemed like a decent plan. I mostly didn't find the support pieces I was looking for. I'm also really high on Rankle right now. So I tried doing some like Archon of Emeria, Rankle, mid-range flyers stuff. And it was close-ish. Everything feels close-ish right now.
Yep.
But ultimately couldn't keep pace with the just ridiculousness of the Omnath deck. But I like it a lot here. It's a little slow for Modern. 3 is a lot when it comes to Modern, but the impact is large.
Well, this deck dips into green for Noble Hierarch. So
good point.
Yeah, you can turn to this thing, which is great. Obviously, very, very excellent card against fetch lands. When we talked about the card, it was more of in the context of Standard, but then we sort of talked about, breaking the parity by playing things with flash. But Aether Vial obviously does a good job of helping you break the parity too. So good stuff. Basically, I think Modern is in a good place when you can play some sort of like white disruptive aggro deck.
I totally agree with you. And I've seen some more combo focused builds of green-white starting to do well in Modern too. Again, just a good sign of format health, at least format health as we define it for Modern. There's still weird stuff going on and broken stuff going on, and we'll get to the weird stuff in a second. But on the whole, this deck dump was pretty positive looking. And I actually think the results from like the challenges and the champs were also pretty promising when it came to Modern.
Yeah, some outliers, but definitely very promising.
Mm-hmm.
All right, next up, we have Dr. Queller. What do you think they're playing?
No idea. Please tell me.
4 copies of Spell Queller, also 3 copies of Skyclave Apparition. Pretty normal-looking Bant Spirits. 21 land, 3 Vial. This is fairly normal. I was working on this for, I think, PT London or something. So, yeah, this is all pretty much what I'm used to seeing.
This is a deck that comes and goes from the metagame. It does look for some specific things to prey on, I think. And then it turns out to be like the better humans deck, basically, at times when it's very good. I think just getting Apparition is a huge push in favor of this archetype over something like humans, though. A meaningful tribal type is worth a lot when you're loaded with lords like this deck is. But like we saw in the last deck, this is just a good card. It matters a lot in the Modern context. It answers all the problematic stuff you might face. So big thumbs up to Skyclave Apparition.
Yeah, I mean, you can protect it with Rattle Chains and Drog Skull Captain, and it being a spirit matters for Mausoleum Wanderer and the Lords and stuff. And I can tell you, playing this deck and trying to use like Reflector Mage or Deputy of Detention,
it hurt.
Those cards very much just felt like this is a clunky 3-mana removal spell, but doesn't really fit into my Flyers game plan. Also Apparition has flying. So I think it is a pretty huge get. And also, it's not like, in the case of Deputy, it's like if they kill it, they just get their thing back immediately. This is like, no matter what, it effectively gets O-code, right?
Yeah, they get a pretty blank piece of cardboard most of the time as it relates to how you are playing the game. Like a ground, whatever, 3/3, 4/4. It's just not going to matter much to the Spirits deck in a lot of instances. And I think that's really, really important to keep note of.
Yep.
So one point, though, real quick, I think you said flying on Skyclave Apparition. I don't think that's right.
Oh, it doesn't fly?
It doesn't fly, no.
Ooh, that makes sense.
It doesn't fly.
That makes sense. I played against it, and I was wondering why my opponent wasn't attacking with it.
Now you know. It seems like it should. I don't blame you for thinking a spirit would fly.
It's like a floaty ghost thing.
I know. And also, I will tell you what actually messes me up way more. It's called Skyclave. Anything called Skyclave, I immediately assume it flies.
Nah, the Shade doesn't fly.
I know none of them do, but if it has the name Skyclave, I think it flies, and I have to reprogram my brain. I had a bunch of actually really interesting games with Skyclave Apparition and Limited, and I think that's why it's cemented for me that this card does not fly. Although when you first said it, I didn't immediately stop you, so it took a second for my brain to catch up and get there.
Yeah, I think the Skyclaves are like the Skyhedrons that were like infected and all the creatures surrounding them like mutated. I could be wrong about that. I know that there are Skyhedrons. Maybe that's not the Skyclave, but that's my guess, I suppose.
Welcome to Lore Corner with Gerry.
Yeah, so like they live in the sky, but they don't need to fly to be there because they have like floating sky castle.
That makes sense to me. Checks out.
Yeah. All right, skipping through some boring modern decks with no new cards.
Boo.
Boo. Urza, boo. Okay. Haricot Rouge playing some Hedron crabs and some Haricot crabs.
Is that beans?
I don't know.
I think it means beans. I think his name translates to red beans, possibly in French. This is very important.
Googling.
Thank you. The people are dying to know.
An edible bean of a variety with small white seeds.
Huh. I don't know why I know that.
That is. I mean, vegetarian, right? So
I guess so. I do eat a lot of beans.
Anyway, playing some Mill. Mill has been doing well. They got Ruin Crab. You can now 8 crab. You can add 8 crab to the list of 8 whack and 8 rack as viable modern archetypes, I suppose. And I mean, Hedron Crab was like the best card, right, in the deck. So
yeah, I would say that.
Yeah, basically getting extra copies of it, making this deck a lot stronger, doesn't surprise me all that much. There's still a ton of variety in these decks. Like I even saw an Azorius version that might have been in this deck dump or in one of the preliminaries. I don't really remember. But yeah, you have Hedron Crab. You have the new 2-mana Mill 8 that can turn into a Traumatize. Just a ton of different options. And this one has Thieves Guild Enforcer too, which I'm not a super big fan of. Like, you get a little bit of milling from it and then it blocks something, but I think you can do better than that.
It feels like we're almost considering being able to play multiple plans here with some aggression from Thieves Guild Enforcer. And I say that because there are a lot of interactive spells in this deck. There's 2 Devour Flesh, 2 Fatal Push, 3 Drown in the Lock. Like, you're kind of challenging your opponent's stuff. You have Cling to Dust to gain a little life. And that's like, you could just play Crypt Incursion, which this deck does. It's got copies of both. But like Cling to Dust says to me, you're trying to do a little more in terms of maybe just letting the game go long and getting there with chip damage. It's weird that Thieves Guild Enforcer is the only source, but
this is kind of normal, I think. Like, Cling as a way to stop Uro is fine and makes sense to me, and it's a cheap way to gain life. And as far as like push, Devour Flesh, I've seen some copies of this deck that have a bunch of pushes and Bloodchief's Thirst. So like playing a bunch of spot removal spells is not that out of the ordinary. And then Drown in the Lock, I think, is just a good card when you're playing this deck.
It's just so hard for me to defend Thieves Guild Enforcer with the thought being like mill 2 block something.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, this
doesn't seem very strong.
This is a Luris deck too. Like they have Luris as their companion, but then sideboard a bunch of 3-mana permanents that have like Ensnaring Bridge and stuff. So I don't know if there's like consideration for that necessarily, but I don't know.
Interesting. I've certainly been familiar with the mill decks. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you that I've queued up any leagues with mill. Although if I had a big modern tournament coming up, I would give it a run. I mean, I like the way it's moving on to a different axis, and it's very consistent now. So
Yeah. Yeah, I own the mill cards. I own this deck. So the fact that like archive traps are going up as a result of Ruin Crab makes me pretty happy. But
I think I probably own everything but Mesmeric Orb, if I had to guess.
dude, that's a staple. You need that one.
I know. They can't be expensive. You're going to tell me they're like $200 or something ridiculous, aren't you?
They were like 15 or 20 last time I checked, but there's also been like a bunch of weird sets where they might have been reprinted, so I don't know.
Okay, let's be serious. I probably don't have any paper modern tournaments on my near horizon, so I don't need to fill in that gap anytime soon.
Yep. Next one I want to talk about is Yama Killer playing the Allosaurus Rider Neoform deck, and he doesn't have them, but you can play Turn Timber Symbiosis. And I would imagine that not playing them is like a very conscious choice.
Yeah, why do you think you would go that route? Do you think protecting your life total that important?
I mean, life total does matter a little bit when you're trying to like Gristlebrand through your deck, but all the dual lands also make blue-green. So like, maybe you have Chancellor of the Tangle and you want your land drop to always make blue for Neoform. I could see that as a potential point, but I know that there are definitely some games where, you lose because you don't have enough green cards to exile for Allosaurus because you drew like 2 or 3 lands, which is pretty unfortunate. So you could play around that to some degree if you wanted to, but Yama Killer, who is very good, decided that was not worth it, and that is worth something. That is a little bit of information that you can take away if you're considering this archetype.
Yeah, it could come up with Nourishing Shoal too. Having another green card there matters quite often.
Yeah, I mean that's 8 life or 7 life, right?
7 life, yeah. So interesting decision, but like you said, I'm going to respect someone who has played far more Neoform than I have.
And Yama Killer probably streamed it too, would be my guess.
Mm-hmm.
Next up, Sin for Life 54, another mono white, another Taxus deck. This one is mono white. 3 Skyclave Apparition, 1 Archon of Emeria. So basically the same stuff going on here. This one has a Stoneforge Mystic package. Always gives me a little pause when I see Stoneforge alongside Leon and Arbiter. But when I was writing about Stoneforge coming back, I was like, I'm pretty sure you just do this anyway.
I miss Noble Hierarch a lot here. It seems very important to me, and I don't know if that these cards are actually powerful enough to exist without Hierarch in the mix. So that's my criticism of this deck, but it got a lot better with Skyclave Apparition. All of these decks benefit a ton.
All right, what do you think about this? Dub O2. You can tap for a white mana only to cast a creature spell.
It's cool. Cool little identity for... white. I mean, white needs something, right?
It does need something. We keep talking about expanding white's color pie or
and
stealing
only
some
paying
of its
off
stuff back.
Other creatures. It kind of fits with the lift each other up mentality of the white color pie. I buy it. You could sell me on it.
I got some other kind of parallel ideas to that, but I'm not going to share them because who cares? So we can just move on.
Wow, you're really embracing the Wizards of the Coast role I gave you earlier in the show. Just
dude, I used to work for them. It didn't work out.
Designing new cards for them, free of charge. What a generous man you are.
No, they're actually like not allowed to look at.
Oh, right, yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah, they can't look at other people's submissions. They just can't accept them because then if they ever use something similar, they can get sued.
Yeah, well. I don't know that I believe that. I don't know if I believe that or not, but that's how they feel. So that's the policy in place.
You could, in theory, and their lawyers are very good at, playing around it, basically.
Yes, they always play around it. I will give you that.
All right, Ocelot 823. How do you feel about Ocelots?
Dope. All animals are dope. Ocelots are cool looking. I am like slightly intimidated by them, I guess. Like any large cat just has such fearsome killing capacity that it can unleash at any time. So I'm not going to invite one into my home,
dude.
But I appreciate them from a distance.
Mistake, man. You just got to have the good cat treats, dude. I have so many cats that visit my backyard. They just heard. They heard I had the good stuff.
So ocelots aren't that big, right? They're like mid-range when it comes to the big cat family.
Yeah, but then you just, dude, you've seen the videos of people giving like tigers belly rubs and stuff, right? You know, they're all claws and teeth until you just like scratch them behind the ears, and that's game.
Did you watch Tiger King and the
I
scene with the missing
I tried.
arm?
I
Okay.
started watching it, and I was just like, this is so horrible. I can't
It,
stand this. I can't stand
it
any part about this.
it was truly horrible. In like, I'm pretty immune to the reality TV car crash stuff that draws attention really hard because it's so disastrous. I couldn't get away from that one. I watched the whole thing.
Okay, whatever. I am gonna belly rub a tiger at some point in my life. I swear to you.
Make sure you've done everything else you wanted to do in the world before you book that appointment.
Maybe it'll be a supervised belly rub. I don't know. Anyway,
I think like there's some merit to I have lived my life. I don't have much time left. This is important to me. What happens, happens. And then you get to belly rub a tiger. Just make sure the tiger is well taken care of. That's all I ask.
yeah. I mean, dude, if I get taken out by a tiger trying to give it love, I mean,
You deserved it.
yeah, it was just my time, you know?
Right.
And I won't say I've lived a great life, but I've lived a life.
Sure.
It hasn't been
All you can ask for.
it hasn't been a full life or a long life, but you know, it's still there. Anyway, Ocelot is rocking some Scourge of the Skyclaves, and this is a weird build. This is I'm just gonna read off the list basically. So 4 Liliana of the Veil, 3 Croxa, 3 Phyrexian Obliterator, 3 Seasoned Pyromancer, maybe my favorite card of all time. 4 Inquisition of Kozilek, 2 Thoughtseize, 1 Angrath's Rampage, 1 Abrade, 4 Fatal Push, 2 Kolaghan's Command, 4 Lightning Bolt, 1 Terminate, 24 lands total, including 4 Graven Cairns to facilitate Obliterator, Seasoned Pyromancer, which is smart. Yeah, this is weird. Explain this to me. Do you get this?
Very mid-range-ish approach to Scourge of the Skyclaves archetype. And I like Scourge in Modern. I think it's an important card. And we're going to get to more decks which contain it. But no, I don't really get this one. It feels like its goals are a little bit conflicted. It's not really ever interacting with its own life total. Like you have your Bloodstained Mires, Polluted Delta, Thoughtseize, all that stuff.
Blood Crypt.
But even then...
Fetch Blood Crypt is like traditional Death Shadow type of stuff, right? Like it's not that uncommon to just have this be a 5/5 pretty soon. Assuming your opponent's kind of doing the same thing.
Right. You have to go after your opponent too. And I don't think this deck is like good at that. Really at all. Like,
yeah.
It's not good at pressuring your opponent's life total. It seems like you want to play really long. So I almost question it's like, are we supposed to kick this a large percentage of the time? Like, is that actually our plan here? 24 lands point me in that direction.
Nah, that's too far gone. I think you just like bolt face or like Crocs of them to enable this thing, or just assume that they're gonna fetch shock.
I don't know, man. I think you're asking for a lot to go well. And it just seems like if you want this card, you wanted Death Shadow. And this deck has really never historically picked up Death Shadow when it could have. It seems like that's an easier setup than getting Scourge of the Skyclaves to break your way. So I'm not really sold on the idea here. I think there are better things to do with Scourge. I would like if this was good. I mean, Phyrexian Obliterator is high on the list of my favorite cards of all time. I've played it a little bit in Pioneer, Historic. So I like it there. I've never won with it there, but like I put it into play a few times and felt pretty good about it. So, and I've seen some goofy combo stuff. So it's cool. I like this deck, but I don't quite think the puzzle is all put together. I think it's just relying on a lot of really powerful cards.
Okay, well let's get to the next deck then. This is by I Still Have Eczema. I'm sorry about that. This one has 2 Scourge of the Skyclaves, and this is just fairly traditional Grixis Death Shadow with a couple extra threats in the mix, basically cutting down on Snapcaster mages to facilitate them. I mean, I think a lot of the stuff you said about the last deck could be said about this, where you're not that great at pressuring your opponent. And, you know, maybe the creator realized that because they're only including 2 copies of Scourge.
Yep. I think this is getting warmer to what I would want to do with Scourge of the Skyclaves, but we're not there yet. And I'm pretty sure we get there in this deck dump, and then I'll put that deck over. But it's got a problem that it doesn't pressure your opponent's life total particularly well. Did you need your 5th and 6th copy of Death Shadow in the traditional Death Shadow deck?
Yes.
Maybe yes. You benefit from it.
Because like you played Tarmogoyf in Jund, and
Sure.
that card was like pretty mopey, to be honest. And you were still just like, well, I kind of just have to play all of them. And then, we figured out that we could play Grixis and get Gurmag Angler and stuff like that. And like you need a secondary threat for sure. And even having like a ninth or 10th threat isn't the worst thing.
Okay. Yeah, I think you can make a good case that some number of Scourge of the Skyclaves will benefit this archetype. I just think you can go harder on this
Yes.
card and really get paid for it.
I agree with that. I will note that this Grixis list has 3 lightning bolts, which they don't normally have. Normally, it's just like fatal pushes all the way down, and
Right.
a lightning bolt if you need another removal spell. And this one has 2 push and 3 bolts. So yeah, maybe bolt face is just the plan.
Small concession there. I like it. I just have to point out, like, Scourge of the Skyclaves, significantly worse than Death Shadow on multiple axes. Like, calling it our 5th and 6th copy is probably a little generous. And I just am concerned about plans that are not fully on board with maximizing this card, because I do think it asks you for a little bit more work.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough.
A couple Cleansing Wildfire in the sideboard, too. I think we'll have more to say about that card as time goes on.
That card is nice.
Yeah.
The next list in the deck dump is Amulet. That, again, I think you can play the green DFC, Turn Timber Symbiosis.
Yeah, I think you should. I'm pretty confident you should. I'm a little surprised to not see it here. So
the mana's tough, for sure. Like I
would just play more lands. Like,
yeah.
I would honestly be comfortable playing 32 lands.
Well, yeah, this deck has 30 lands and 2 explorers, so we can just cut those explorers for more lands, probably.
I think so. This is also a Karn build of Amulet. Like, there's a lot of other things going on that you don't necessarily have to do anymore when it comes to Amulet.
Right. We have a Luca Jeskai Control deck from Gandalf the Grey that is light on new cards, just 1 Valakut Awakening, but it's kind of cool to see that as a card that can be a land or just shuffle your Emrakul back into your deck. I mean, we have like Fire Prophecy and See Beyond and stuff to do that, but that's another option.
I like putting it as part of your mana base. I also saw this card popping up a little bit in Legacy Lands, which I thought was pretty interesting too.
Dude, I love that.
Yeah.
That is awesome, actually. Too bad we can't loan these things.
Yeah, that is the one downside, but you get paid a lot for like loaming other stuff. I mean, this is what we talked about, I think, when we first saw Valakut Awakening, is combining it with trashy cards. And, Legacy Lands is very good at producing trashy cards. And also, this is just another land you get to play in a lot of instances. So it seems quite good there.
Ganyan CHN playing 0 lands, but 23 new cards. 23 DFCs alongside Goblin Char Belcher and kind of what you would expect. Desperate Ritual, Poetic Ritual, Simian Spirit Guide. Iron Crag Feet is kind of a new one that works pretty well with Belcher. And then Blood Moon, Chalice of the Void, and Recross the Paths, which a lot of people were questioning, but it basically just stacks your deck. And then there are some sideboard plans that go along with that.
Yeah, there's no basically about it, right? You just get to actually stack your deck.
Well, you get Reforge the Soul on top, which is the big thing.
Right. And then you get immediate reloads. So this is the deck. You and I saw it earlier in the week, and we kind of went, oh boy, I don't know that this is broken. I don't know that this is problematic for Modern. It didn't dominate tournaments or anything like that. It's weird to see. I don't know that it's good to have this exist. And this is one of the ways large card pools and bending the traditional rules of Magic can go a little sideways. I think this is probably a flash in the pan. I don't think it does much to the format. So in that scenario, it's fine. It's cool to see something new, but it gave me pause when I saw this. And I was like, oh, is this the type of thing we really want to be enabling? Because this is not fun Magic to play. Your opponent gets to stack their deck across from you, and you can lose on turn 1. Very, very much in play. Blood Moon to lock your opponent out of the game. Love that. People love being locked under Blood Moon. So there's a bunch of stuff here that does not feel great.
Yeah, but on the bright side, the deck is so threat light that, Force of Negation is a pretty good check to stuff like that. So
it is.
I'm happy that card exists. And obviously there are a lot of Thoughtseize decks running around and everything. So I think It is frustrating. It's not good gameplay. It's very similar to what we were talking about in Standard, where, okay, maybe it's not busted, but it's still, it's not doing anything good for the formats. Like, why does this exist? But
Yeah, Modern bears the weight of that much better than Standard does. So if
true.
like this is a one-off thing, I don't really have any gripe about it. It's just very strange to see the first time. And when it can win on turn one, I've made the case that despite Neoform basically never winning anything besides one tournament ever, won by Matsugan, of course, I think it should still be eliminated from the format. I just don't think anyone benefits from it being around. And you can make some of the same arguments with a deck like this that is capable of winning on turn one, but really neither here nor there. And you can just hit it if it's a problem, if that's your philosophy.
Yep. Next deck from Mordekaiser, Niv-Mizzet Reborn with Urian and 2 copies of Omnath.
I think that number is going to go higher as time goes on.
I would think so. It is kind of weird to me that, a lot of these decks have started with 2 copies. We'll just play 2 and try it out, see how it is. And the decks aren't really morphing around Omnath very much. It's just well, I can very easily play this, and it kind of fits with what I'm trying to do. But you're going up to Niv-Mizzet. Why are you not just playing 4 copies of Omnath? Like Niv-Mizzet can draw you 6 cards or whatever, but Omnath, I think, is just a better card pound for pound.
Yeah, I guess you can't hit it off Niv-Mizzet. That certainly is not enough to talk me off of it, especially given the fact that you just are loaded up with fetch lands. We're playing Evolving Wilds sometimes in Standard, so we can get this double activation, and you get it mostly free here. It's very easy to do this. 3 is not going to happen ever. Is that right?
3.
Trying to give a quick look. 3 land drops in a single turn.
Well, you can just sandbag fetches.
Okay, yeah. Good point. Certainly won't be a big part of the plan, not like in Standard where you just go off and dome your opponent for 20 over the course of a turn and cycling through all your Omnaths or anything like that. So these are a little bit fairer Omnaths somehow in the Modern format, but I think they're more consistent, and this deck just needs a secondary threat to it. It will benefit from having that.
Has Uro too, so that kind of makes it pretty easy. But even so, just jamming Omnath on 4 is cool. I think this deck is completely fine doing that, but also turn 5 Omnath into fetch land, just cleanly cast Niv-Mizzet or Bring to Light.
Sounds good.
This deck has Utopia Sprawl too, so you get to accelerate a little bit. So I don't know. I just, card is too good. I maybe just stop being a Niv-Mizzet deck and start being an Omnath deck.
Oh, that's only a matter of time until we start doing that in Modern too.
Yeah. And again, 4 Cleansing Wildfires in the sideboard. Love to see it. Also, 1 Gaia's Blessing for the mill decks. And I've seen that show up a little bit, or playing an Eldrazi in your sideboard. So
right.
That's a thing that you need to prep for.
Can't love to see that if you are the mill decks, although they often have multiple ways to play around that. So
yeah. Scrolling through all these silly deck lists, not playing new cards. And here we get to D. Frank playing basically the Uro Field of the Dead pile that people were playing not too long ago, except now it has 3 copies of Omnath. And yeah, you can play this as just Bant or just Teamer or whatever, but this one gets to play Ren 6 and Teferi and Omnath and just, all the broken mythics from Standard past. So this deck is solid. This deck is good.
Deck should definitely be called the Ghosts of Standard Past. I guess using Ren and 6 kind of breaks that a little bit, but still.
And and Teferi is not mythic, so it all falls apart under scrutiny.
Look, most of what I say does. You just gotta let it run by and try and get the points before people really let it sink in. Seagate Restoration. This is the first time I think we've seen one of the mythic double face lands played for just value. Obviously it was in the Belcher deck, but that's to skirt the rules a little bit. I am surprised by that. I think these cards are quite good, particularly Agadeem's Awakening seems like a very easy include in some Death Shadow builds to me. Maybe you have to change some other stuff around the mana base, and it doesn't really work with the really hard commitment to Grixis, but I think you can explore doing things built around that card because it's good enough to do so. So I'd like to see people reconsider that. I even think you can go back to Fiend Artisan type stuff and Stitcher Supplier combinations. And there's all kinds of good stuff you can do in Modern for a pretty fair take on Death Shadow that gets really hard upgraded by Agadeem's Awakening. But I like the one Seagate Restoration here. I'm surprised some of the more controlling like Jeskai stuff doesn't do the same thing. I don't know. I mean, one thing I'll say is that people have not embraced these cards the same way you and I have, even when it comes to standard. Although the more time that people seem to spend with the Omnath decks, I notice more and more double face cards creeping into their deck. I can't say I'm shocked.
Yeah, Seagate Restoration in this one initially made me double take because it was just like the idea is that you will cast this card at some point, right? And in this case, like you have Hour of Promise to accelerate you, you have Ren and 6 to pick up land drops, Uro to accelerate you. It's like, okay, yeah, maybe you cast this, but realistically, I'm pretty interested in stuff like this because of Field of the Dead.
Yeah, just another basic, essentially, another land type to go ahead and put into play. So I buy that too.
Yeah, not an island for Mystic Sanctuary, but I mean, you know, you're going to put enough lands onto the battlefield that, yeah, you can't Sanctuary on turn 4 a lot of the time, but, you know, when it gets to turn 5, 6, 7, when you actually do start wanting to do it, it doesn't matter. You're going to have enough islands.
Right. No pathways yet either, I would note.
True. Yeah, I mean, maybe not great for a deck like this, but yeah.
Agreed. I was speaking more generally.
Yeah, I mean, like maybe green-white taxes. I don't know. I didn't look at that mana base explicitly, but maybe there are just enough dual lands already that, you know, you would rather just have like a Temple Garden or Razor Verge Thicket, and that just ends up being worse than all those.
Sure.
Again, Cleansing Wildfire in the sideboard. Good card.
Yeah, we're going to get to some main deck ones, and then we can really do our spiel on that.
Yep. Spider Space, mono-white taxes, Spider Space, very good at like these low to the ground, like disruptive aggro decks. And I kind of trust them on what they're doing with the archetype. This one has 4 Skyclave Apparition, 2 Archon of Emeria, and 1 Maul of the Skyclaves. Love it.
Wasn't expecting to see that card
Stoneforge.
in the old modern deck dump. Yeah, okay. The card has been very strong against me. I've seen it a little bit in standard, a little bit in limited. I've been impressed by it. And if you're throwing Stoneforge Mystic in the mix, I believe you can find spots where it's quite good.
Next deck is from Hot Bread. I almost tweeted this one when I saw it because I was so excited. This is Naya, Landfall, Scapeshift. This is like an old school Billy Moreno special. I think he was the first one that I saw playing like Step Links, Knight of the Reliquary, Scapeshift. And this deck gets Step Links, Akum Hellhound, Brushfire Elemental, and Elvish Reclaimer as their early drops. And then you have like Atarka's Command Lightning Bolt. You have Ren and 6 to keep making your land drops, and Scapeshift as a finisher for all the landfall creatures. And then you also just get to be a Luris deck with Mishra's Bauble.
So back when I still believed that you could just brew whatever you wanted in Modern and find success, because I think back then it was easier to do so. The cards weren't quite as powerful. I must have flirted with the Scapeshift Landfall deck dozens of times. And I went back to it over and over and over because it feels like there should be something there. And no real concept of how good this deck is now, but the redundancy that it has picked up with multiple 1-drops, Step Links, and Akum Hellhound. I kind of believe it. I kind of believe this could be something good. I don't know if it's top tier, but this definitely sparks my interest enough that I want to go ahead and give it a shot.
I think it's close. I mean, before you basically had Step Links as your turn 1 thing, and there wasn't a lot of other great ways to actually put pressure on your opponent.
Drop off after that, yeah.
Yeah, so now you have Hellhound on top of it, and you have Elvish Reclaimer with Flagstones, which is pretty cool. I'm a little skeptical about the Reclaimer, not going to lie, but whatever. And I don't know, man. It feels so much stronger, too, that now, even if they do kill all your creatures, they run you out of gas, you still have Luris.
Go to Luris, yeah.
And
not a bad plan.
The sideboard has a Field of the Dead, too, so if you want to get like really late and Scapeshift into that thing, that's another game plan. It's like this deck has all the angles.
I like it. I like it a lot. I think this is a well-built version of this archetype, and you could do worse than spending some time really getting this one to hum.
And you can also Scapeshift early with a Flagstones, right? You could like Scapeshift on 6 lands to trigger a field.
Makes sense to me.
Are there enough different lands to get?
What do we have?
Yeah, you should be good.
It's a weird tension because you're also trying to maximize your fetch lands, right? For just natural beatdowns. So.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, if you have 6 lands in play, one of them's a flagstones. I guess you can just try and fetch like multiple Sacred Foundries, because that's the one you have the most of. And then yeah, you
If
should be
you know
able.
you're building towards this plan, yeah.
Yeah, you should be able to like mix fetches in the field to get there. Because there's also
Okay.
like Sajiri Steppe, Soaring Sea Cliff, so you have some one-off lands. But your mana post Scapeshift might be awkward if you care about that.
I think the thought is if you got the scape shift off, you're doing okay. So
Yeah.
hopefully that's true.
Next up, Karusu with Kiki Chord. They've just absolutely been crushing it with this deck. This is a Urian version, and not too much in the way of new stuff. Just a Skyclave apparition, which seems again like a pretty good upgrade to Deputy of Detention type of stuff. And this deck is just Naya anyway. And then there's a Balagad recovery in the sideboard, which is confusing.
Very confusing. I won't even guess. I have no idea. But I will tell you that the Kiki Chord devotees, they have a reason for everything. And it's usually a pretty good reason. And they usually have played this deck so much that they just know these gameplay spots are bound to come up. And they're like, this is how I get through this specific situation.
I'm willing to go down that rabbit hole a lot of the time. This is not one of them.
Okay. I have faith in Kurisu. I've never actually seen a Kurisu deck before, but you say they're a Kiki Chord devotee. I know what these people are like. My friend Max Brown was obsessive about this deck and had a stretch in like the old modern PTQ era where he had like 6 PTQ top 8s in the span of a 2-month period, all playing Kiki Chord, all changing like a ridiculous card every single time that would pay huge dividends in some matchup down the road that made no sense to anyone else. So
Yeah, I'm not seeing it with that one. But if you want to look up Karusu on Goldfish, it's just you know a list of 5-0s with just this deck. So they're kind of the master. Anyway, JTL 005, another mono white deck. Mana base is weird. 4 Cavern Souls, 4 Field of Ruin, 15 Snow Covered Plains, Aether Vial, 1 copy of Mana Tithe, and then some Heliod stuff, but like life gainy. And then the new cards are Luminarch, Aspirant, and Skyclave Apparition. So Aspirant is good with Walking Ballista. So this deck is like, the combo is there, right? But they're not really leaning into it a lot.
I like Aspirant quite a bit. I
It's a good
never
card.
actually thought to combine it with Walking Ballista, but I'm sure there are some archetypes where doing so is lights out, probably a very effective plan. And maybe it actually helps your combo turns out a little bit, make those a little bit easier to achieve as well. So I'd be willing to give it a shot. This looks a little soft to me, a little narrow in its approach. And I think you can find better ways to go after these combo type setups. I saw a green-white Heliod deck, which looked pretty promising to me, kind of an amalgam of this and scales.
Yep.
So a little bit more interested in that approach, but I do like Luminarch Aspirant as a card, and I like what we're doing with it here.
I think it's good. I'm not sure if it actually reaches back to modern or not, but I don't know. It's not like the white true drops, like especially if you're not doing very disruptive things. They're all pretty interchangeable, probably. At least this gets to combo with Ballista potentially.
Yeah, I wish there was like a good one to load up, so you just had a really nice curve out to bank on with Luminarch Aspirant, but
Yeah.
I can't think of anything offhand.
Yeah, like loading up your Giver of Runes is not super exciting.
Right.
All right, continuing on, scrolling down. There is a dubious challenge, Charming Prince deck with no new cards or whatever, but I don't know. Maybe this is another one that can play the green DFC.
Surprising lack of these cards.
And we have KK Hyphen with Orzhov, Eldrazi with 2 Skyclave Apparitions. Not super shocking there.
Good pickup for that deck.
Ballastin 93. 8 Crab, 3 Blood Chief's Thirst in addition to 4 Fatal Push. 2 Ashiok Dream Render. That's, it fits in your game plan and is main deck Graveyard Hate. That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Two Fraying Sanity, which is a card that people have kind of like ignored in this archetype. Not like ignored, but like they've tried it and just been like, oh, it's too slow. But once you have 8 Crabs, it might actually be good enough.
Okay.
And I don't know, just small things like one Miko Koro in the mana base. Love me a Miko Koro.
Which one? I don't even know what that card does.
It taps for colorless, and then you can pay 2 and tap it to have each player draw a card.
Okay, very nice. And a Boro here as well. I think I know what that one does. Blue, return to your hand, right?
It's colorless to return to your hand. Taps for blue.
Colorless, return to your hand. Thank you.
Yeah.
That seems quite good here.
Oboro is Palace of Bouncy Bouncy, so yeah, pretty good with the crabs. Make sure you don't run out of landfall shenanigans, but like Miko Koro does a lot of that same stuff too.
Yeah, no drown in the lock here. Worth noting. It seems like a more combo-centric approach with once you add Fraying Insanity, you're just like, okay, I just need to survive. And then I find Burst Mill essentially to get my opponent very quickly.
Right. And I don't know, over the course of the last few months, Monastery Swiftspear has gotten very, very popular. And I think it's died down a little bit since the initial rush, but I think, 4 Fatal Push, 3 Bloodchief's Thirst is very cognizant of the fact that you want to kill that thing immediately, or at least, be able to crab into Fetch a Swamp and kill something. And
sure,
Drown in the Lock being 2 mana, maybe it's just not really what you care about. Maybe you don't care about countering anything or killing bigger creatures or whatever. It is just very much I have to kill Swiftspear so we can race. Or
yeah, Bloodchief Thirst cleans up a lot of the problems in the format for sure. They all tend to be very low cost, so.
Yeah, or maybe now it's killing opposing crabs.
Might be.
Oh, no. Oh, we actually have to talk about this, I guess. All right, God Shadow, Azorius Control.
Favorite card in the whole set.
Azorius Control with 2 Confounding Conundrums. And Michael Majors has been on this kick for a long time where he's just using this alongside Field of Ruin and just things like that to mildly annoy his opponents. Maybe not really actually get anywhere, but to provide a mild annoyance. And granted, Conundrum at least messes with all the fetch lands in the format, right? So
it does a little bit more. I mean, messes very slightly though in most instances if you're cognizant of it. You can get them once, but you shouldn't ever be hard punished by Confounding Conundrum. I guess you're playing half a turn behind. So, okay, maybe that's annoying enough.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, obviously, if you have a lot of instant speed play, maybe it doesn't matter all that much, but
right.
You can't just play your fetch land. Yeah. And just use it immediately without having to pick up your land. And for a lot of decks in Modern, even picking up their 3rd or 4th land probably doesn't matter because they weren't going to hit their next land drop anyway. So, again, mild annoyance, but
that should have been the name of this card, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Mild annoyance.
Well, I mean, there are Uro decks, right? There are a lot of Uro decks in the format, and maybe this is a mild enough annoyance for them. I'm not sure.
Have you played against Confounding Conundrum with the Omnath deck? So
many times.
Does it matter really ever? Again, mild annoyance, and then you just beat it.
So there was one game where I don't know that I would have won, but it definitely set me back a lot. Where basically I had Omnath into Escape to the Wilds and my hand was all lands.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't really able to develop as a result of that. But there were also games where it's okay, I have a Dryad and, all the, Uro, the normal landfall-y things, and I'll just play the game as normal until I have enough stuff to actually just go off and pick up all my lands. And then it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah. During the period I was doing the red-green landfall stuff, I did get to live the Confounding Conundrum, making my deck actually better dream, which was pretty exciting.
Okay. Yeah, that hasn't really come up for me, but I'm sure it could.
It's tough for it to happen, but it can happen. But generally just a mild annoyance, and then you play through it and move on with your life.
Whenever I get paired against someone on Arena and I see Uri and Sky Nomad, I'm just all right, mild annoyance, here we come,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's about it. I've never lost a match to it. I will say that.
You might have just jinxed yourself. Let's see.
Well, I don't know. It's a coin flip as to whether or not I play any more with Omnath before any action is taken. So we'll see.
Okay.
Scrolling through. Siege Rhino sighting. Okay, here's the good stuff. Here's the good stuff. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Cameron _1. They know what's up. As much as I hate Jeskai Control in Modern, this deck is fire. So there's 23 lands. We have Shark Typhoon, which I think is huge for this deck because before you were trying to kill with like Snapcaster and Lightning Bolt and Colonnade, and you didn't have. I mean, you could play like Think Twice, and now you could play like Frantic Inventory and stuff like that, or you could just fire off a Cryptic Command. But like usually when your opponent just like passed, you had no way to spend your mana, and Shark Typhoon actually gives you something to do that with. And this deck is, granted, Planeswalker heavy, Teferi Time Raveler, Hero of Dominaria, Jace, 7 Planeswalkers total, but they also have Cleansing Wildfire and Flagstones of Trocaire.
Yeah, that is not a combo. That is not a combo that crossed my mind. And if you remember, we got, well, okay, maybe I got a little excited about things like Brought Back, because I thought maybe if these decks could start playing ahead of curve, they could actually start competing in Modern. That was bad. Didn't work whatsoever. But Cleansing Wildfire on your own Flagstones,
easy
in the matchups where like you don't need Cleansing Wildfire, that sounds great to me. And also there's a bunch of matchups where you just benefit from having Cleansing Wildfire. And those are typically the problematic matchups for a deck like Jeskai Control. So I think this is a pretty big get for this archetype. I don't know that I'm sold and completely all in, but this does look promising, and it's enough to get me to queue up a league. I'll say that.
Dude, your opponent's playing like No Land Dredge or No Land Belcher, and you just get to Wildfire them?
Feels pretty good.
Unless you get like turn 1 Belcher, then obviously it feels bad. But
now we always have the Force of Negation. We're fine. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. I'm excited about this. I played a Pioneer League when I saw the Omnath list come out, and I am tempted, maybe not to play this exact list, but certainly to do some sort of shenanigans.
I am curious if you need to do as much with these Planeswalkers now that you have access to Shark Typhoon. I feel like that package can shrink a little bit.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't really like him that much.
Teferi is not a card that has impressed me in quite some time now. So large Teferi, 5 mana Teferi I'm speaking about. So if I am looking for starting points to maybe trimmel the fat here, I'm looking in that direction. But yeah, I can start with this list and take it from there. And maybe the whole paradigm changes when you finally add some acceleration to this deck and you can Cleansing Wildfire your Flagstones. So
right.
I'll check it out.
Cool. Report back. Next up, we have the Tunneling Cat with Eldrazi Tron utilizing 1 Forsaken Monument.
Have you played this card at all?
No, it seems kind of busted though.
It's good. It's real good. I think if there are substantial changes to this standard, I don't know if people remember, but I shared a basically like mono colorless black deck where the only black spells were Blood Chief's Thirst and Agonizing Remorse. And this is standard, so a little bit off context, but it was 4 Forsaken Monuments, 4 Ugin, Stonecoil Serpent, basically all of the potential colorless creatures you can play, because there aren't really that many good ones, quite frankly.
Yeah, and I tried looking, man. It was like, all right, Ginger Brute, Palladium Mirror, let's go.
What's the one that gets the random counters? Like Crystalline Giant? Is that what it is?
Yeah, yep.
I had that in my deck. I had Palladium Mirror. So Mirror's fine when your goal is like get to an Ugin. Deck couldn't keep up with Omnath, like many other things in the format. But in terms of just like proof of concept, could this be something? It really impressed me. Like there were very, very strong turns with Forsaken Monument where your opponent just couldn't play back. I had 4 Maze Mind Tome as a source of card advantage, which like these decks shouldn't typically have. And then you get to scry really hard to your Ugins. So that deck I thought was super impressive. As far as the modern context, I don't know. I don't think this changes anything for Eldrazi Tron, but it does use this card really well in terms of like, it's a deck that both wants to ramp and has some beatdown plans as well. And pumping up these usually lame-o matter reshapers into a more impressive 5/4. Maybe that is enough where you can start to explore builds that push a little harder on Forsaken Monument and get the job done that way.
It's a reasonable card target too.
Sure. Yeah. Additional copy in the sideboard makes sense to me.
Next deck is from Borgilla MTG10, or like Borgia. I don't know. This is a good looking deck list right here. This is Monastery Swiftspear, Soulscar Mage, Scourge of the Skyclaves. This is how you enable this card.
Yep.
You Thoughtseize, you like fetch, shock, Thoughtseize, attack them with Swiftspears. This card is huge. It's alive, it's online.
This and the next deck are what I have been waiting for. This is one way to do it, the more burn focused way to go about things. And I think if there's a bunch of creatures in the format you want to kill, this is the way to go about it. You have just so many things to pick off opposing mana dorks or opposing Monastery Swiftspears. So if it is a creature-focused format, I really like this approach to enabling Scourge of the Skyclaves, but I am bigger on the next deck in a vacuum, I think.
The next deck is gas. This is a deck that makes me want to play a league somehow. KUHB. This is...
Cub.
I don't know. This is Death Shadow, Monastery Swiftspear, Akum Hellhound, Scourge of the Skyclaves. This is what the 4-color Death Shadow deck basically always wanted to be, where you don't have to have a bunch of extraneous colors anymore. You no longer have to splash step links. And this deck also has an Agadeem's Awakening for good measure, which I think is rad because you have a lot of good ones, and now you have a decent good 2.
This deck is doing an excellent job at sizing both Death Shadow and Scourge of the Skyclaves. I understand why you want 8 copies here because you do such a good job getting paid off on them. For mutagenic growth, managing your life total. For Lightning Bolt, you're immediately on the battlefield with Monastery Swiftspear again. So all this looks amazing to me. And I think this could very well be a future top tier competitor, along with the previous deck as well. Like, I think the metagame has to break a certain way where you really want to hard focus on removal like that. But this seems more just abstractly powerful. It's disruptive. It kills very, very quickly. And it just has a lot of redundancy built into these large creatures that are going to be tough for some decks to deal with. So I am on board with this particular deck list.
Gaius Blessing in the sideboard.
Already accounting for the mill decks. There's also a bunch of Feed the Swarms in the sideboard of the last deck. And you and I talked a little bit about how that card could be important when you're trying to preserve access to your graveyard in post-board games. So it's good to see that starting to break into. Cleansing Wildfires in that sideboard as well, 4 copies.
Yep. It does make me sad that this deck is, like, it wants to be a Lurrus deck, but it has Street Wraith, and, like, you need the Street Wraith to enable the shadows, and you have, like, bobble fetch land tricks and stuff. So I do like that. I could see a world where you might want to, like, keep the Lurrus and board out Street Wraith in some matchups, though.
Yeah, I buy that.
Like, maybe you play, like, a Lurrus main, and then you just side out Lurrus and Street Wraiths.
Yeah, yep. I like where your head's at.
But there's also, like, Hooting Mandrills in the sideboard to use. I don't know. Mysteries. Tug of Naxos. This is Azorius Mill with On Thin Ice, Path to Exile, Ruin Crab, Maddening Cacophony for the new cards. Cacophony is the 2-mana mill 8 or 6-mana Traumatize. Path to Exile does not force a search for Archive Trap, but it incentivizes a search, so that's cool. And this one also has Manic Scribe, just to go super hard on, like, the creature milling plan, and Lurrus out of the board.
Yeah, I know this is your favorite version of this deck because of the 2 timely reinforcements in the sideboard. So
dude, those should
on board.
Get it main. What are you doing?
I had a feeling.
Also, where's the Miko Koro? I don't understand.
You fix that, fire off a Azorius Mill League, report back.
Nah, I might just, like, goldfish it.
Okay.
That sounds way more fun. Wu-Tang 08, another Death Shadow deck. This one with Tarmogoyf. A Scourge of the Skyclaves, only 1 copy, but 2 copies, Bryan, of Magmatic Channeler.
Mm-hmm.
This card is...
that was
it's good.
On my top 10 list. I think it's just like a solid card. Hasn't done anything in Standard thus far. I don't even know that I've seen a Magmatic Channeler list. I know Ryan Overturf was super high on Magmatic Channeler in, like, typical prowessy builds. I don't remember if he was doing it in Pioneer or Modern, but certainly knows a ton about those archetypes and loves this card there. Said it was way more powerful than he expected.
Yeah,
so that's a good sign.
Ryan had a Pioneer list with Phoenix and Fiery Temper.
That's the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah,
yep.
It looks good to me.
Yeah, I thought it looked quite good. Channeler, I've played it a bunch in Limited, and it's not good there. Well, okay.
It's fine. Good. You just shouldn't expect... Good. You shouldn't expect constructed level payoffs.
So hard to actually effectively loot with it. That's the thing that kept coming up. And maybe it gets way easier in this context. I won't say maybe. It gets way easier in this context. All your spells cost basically nothing, and you have a bunch of stuff you're happy to discard. So I buy this as an important card in Modern, Pioneer, maybe even Legacy possibly. When you are able to build your deck in a very specific way, you can get rewarded from Magmatic Channeler.
I mean, when you're playing a bunch of 7 mana cards in limited, maybe not a bunch or whatever, but yeah, obviously you can hit, and that sucks. So maybe don't activate this thing on turn 3 unless you're really trying to hit a land drop or something. I don't know.
Yeah, you had to be very cautious with it. And
Yeah.
I don't think that will carry over to constructed formats for the most part.
Right. But constructed, especially modern, everything costs 1 or 2 or 0. This is still very much a Lurrus format, or at least like Lurrus friendly, Lurrus adjacent. So I don't know. Channeler is good. I'm not sure if it's better than the other options, but like we noted with some of these other Scourge decks, unless you have Swiftspear in your deck, it's kind of difficult to actually get that thing online. So I understand and respect having 2 channelers, and this is also a traverse deck too. So like if in the super late game you want to traverse for a threat, maybe it's Scourge, certainly Scourge over Tarmogoyf, but maybe Scourge over Death Shadow too.
Yeah, I buy it. Also, more Cleansing Wildfires in the sideboard. Maybe the most important modern card in this set. I don't know. There's a bunch that really making a pretty wide impact, and that's been par for the course lately. We kind of expect all of our new sets to hit modern right away, but this one seems to be doing it in a much more safe, healthy, beneficial way, maybe with the possible eventual exception of Omnath, but I don't even know if Omnath's like 100% going to be a modern banger. It's much harder for expensive things without like the recursion of Uro to really matter here. So I think it'll see some play. I don't think it's going to be as impactful, but a lot of these smaller cards, really big gets for the format, and they clean up some of the problems that have existed for a while, like Cleansing Wildfire being an option for all of these fair decks against things like Tron. That's a game changer.
It is. And I think it's important to note that Wildfire is doing a lot of the good work that like Trophy was supposed to, but the problem with Trophy is you just run out of gas, basically.
Yep.
And this kind of fixes that. And there's just a lot of weird corner case scenarios for this card to be good too, where, I don't know, like say you need cards in your graveyard for Gurmag Angler or Tarmogoyf or whatever. There's like weird things like that you can do. And then it's not just a thing that's good against Tron. I mean, I guess like Trophy is also good against the DFC landless decks or whatever, but now you have a lot of incentive to play it, and there are cool things you can do with flagstones, and I don't know, I like it a lot.
I do too. Happy to see it here. Happy in general with the shape of modern right now. Wish there was a little bit more incentive for me to be playing it, but such is life in 2020. Tough to get everything to line up.
Dude, there was a weekend, trying to remember where it was, where I don't know. There were just a few weekends in a row, I guess, where I played some PTQs on Magic Online. And there was one weekend specifically where I was in Reno and I played like a legacy and a modern one. And I don't know, I didn't really want to queue, but I did want to like, figure out formats, grind, and beat up on people. And that was a lot of fun. I should maybe cherry pick a weekend where I can do that.
This seems like the right format to do it in. I think there's still a bunch of unexplored territory and promising leads we were able to suss out from this deck dump.
Yeah, agreed. And a lot of places to go too. Mm-hmm. Anyway, at the end of every episode, we do a question from the fine folks in our Discord. And the question we selected this week comes from Kill Panic. And Kill Panic wants to know, Brian, is this the last straw?
I like this question because it's a question that like it answers itself. Are you listening to this right now? Are you still here? Are you waiting to see what happens on Monday? If things change dramatically, are you hopping right back in the standard queues? My answer to all of that is yes. I am as interested as I was a week ago. I am sad that this has happened. I wish it wouldn't keep happening. It's tough to deal with, but ultimately, like, next week's a new week. I'm going to be able to probably play standard again and have some interest in figuring things out. And I don't know. I mean, like, was there some impact on my wallet? Probably. Was it worse for other people? Probably. And I have empathy for that. It's tough to keep going through this, but honestly, if you want to give some more props, which nobody does, but I guess I'm in a prop giving mood right now, you got the bans out as quickly as you possibly could. Like, the set's not even officially on sale yet. So if you're trying to prevent people from making purchases based on certain assumptions, you've done your job as well as you possibly can, I think. I mean, granted, you could like not make the problematic card in the first place. And I guarantee that's what they want. They don't want to keep stepping on this rake and ending up in these scenarios. But where it doesn't work out, I appreciate that they were swift about it. I hope they come to a sufficient realization that it's not as simple as just taking off like a little piece of this and letting it stand. I think this is a spot for more aggression. I'd rather have you go too broad than too narrow. But for me, this isn't anything resembling the last straw. I don't ever want to take away people's personhood and their right to be upset about stuff and to expect better from companies that they're willing to support. You have every justification for feeling that way. It's just not where my head's at these days. I'm just like, fix it. Let's move on. Let's do the next thing and I'll deal with it.
Yeah. My answer is just one word. No, it isn't, which is interesting because, what actually is going to be the last straw, But,
well, hopefully we don't have to answer that. But
yeah, agreed. I mean, there have definitely been periods where if this was not my job, I would probably be doing something else. But this is not one of those periods. Like I'm still invested in standard like post rotation, and I'm certainly interested in like modern historic pioneer and stuff like that. And maybe standard will be good, but they definitely did get me for a second bullet because I needed more wild cards to build the decks that I wanted to build.
Oh yeah, those mythic mana bases are not cheap.
No. And yeah, that is probably how they got me, was the DFCs mostly, because I still have some rares left over.
Yep. Yeah, plenty of rares, no mythics. I think the clearest indication for me is like, we just did this show and I had a really good time. Like, granted, you and I generally have a good time when we get together and talk with each other just because we enjoy each other's company. But like, most of our focus when we do this is on Magic. And if Magic was in some disastrous, ruinous state, I don't think I would enjoy doing this on a week-to-week basis. But despite any malaise I might feel throughout the week, when it comes time to be here to talk about it, to look for ways forward, to postulate on what went wrong, how we can solve it, all that stuff is still super interesting to me. And even the problems are interesting. Like, I enjoyed our discussion to start this show off. I think it's interesting to talk about how you can fix these things going forward. And I just don't really see a last straw for me. And if you feel differently, I respect that. At some point, I get being fed up, but for me, it's just kind of a cost of doing business. I hope and wish for things to get better, but I'm still here, not going anywhere.
The difference for me lies in my confidence level for the employees in various branches of the company, right? Where it is very clear to me that R&D can do good work. They're capable of doing good work, and they do good work outside of, in the case of the last few years, it was like isolated incidents to some degree, right? It was like, this set is great minus Oko, or like, this set is great minus Omnath, and they took a different direction, decided to focus on other things, and that changed the design philosophy for, basically like what kind of cards they were pushing out. And they have to go through some growing pains with that and learn from it. And that is happening. Before it was like, okay, fires, maybe we don't make cards that double people's mana at 4 mana. I think that box is checked. I think they learned that. And Omnath is another card in a line of cards that kind of do that. But now with Uro and Omnath, it's like, okay, this is what happens when we tack life gain onto ramp spells and kind of negate the downside of ramping. It's like, these are things that we are all learning, right? And I have a feeling that will get better over time. In the case of things like organized play, I do not share the same confidence. So
that's a whole nother can of worms.
Yeah. So if anything actually causes me to just be like, you know what, I'm done, it would probably be something along those lines. But I mean, like, they effectively did push me out of organized play, right? Like, I have no desire to grind and play in tournaments anymore. And that was as a result of their decisions. So I'm still interested in the game and helping people succeed and building decks and all of that stuff. But I mean, maybe that just speaks to like, no matter what OP does poorly to make me not want to interact with that part of the game or the company, like, there's still just going to be like arena and talking about it and building decks and whatever. So yeah, maybe there isn't a last straw. We'll see.
Yeah. So when it comes to OP, I'm willing to basically throw aside my criticisms for this era. I just think it's like, I don't have it in me to fault people for not having a good plan through COVID. I've criticized individual decisions very harshly, things like disappearing money and still taking PTQ entries from people. I was a very, very vocal critic of, but in terms of like OP not being good or healthy or making me wanting to engage with it right now, I don't really know that you could succeed at that task. So I get just counting your losses. For me, what's going to be the important thing is what they do when we put all of this behind us. That is what's going to be telling. And if that moment they let it go by when everyone is dying to get together and play Magic and to embrace the gathering and to welcome in all these new people who have been drawn to the game by Arena, because there are still so many of them that could be part of our like paper community and our OP space that all deserve a chance to experience what we got to experience for years and years. If they mess that up, that's as close as I could see myself getting to it being the last straw, because that's a golden opportunity that you just have to nail.
Yeah, to clarify, the COVID stuff is whatever. Like, obviously, it's difficult for everyone. I mean, SCG is struggling with the same stuff, CFB, and to everyone's credit, like a lot of people are stepping up and trying to like fill that void and everything. But like, I was kind of done before all that stuff went down. So
sure, fair point,
dude. Like 2005, me would love for everything to be online, Pro Tours included.
I am sure. Probably points where I felt the same, and now the weekend rolls around and I'm like, well, I could play this Magic tournament or I could go outside. And I'm just like, ooh, outside, so much sun. And that's the way it seems to go every single weekend. So the love for the game is still there. The love for the trying to win a tournament, not so much.
Well, it does say something that I'm excited about playing in a modern tournament versus like a standard tournament, you know? Like sure. I was excited to play Omnath the first few days after the set came out on Arena and like build the best version and fine tune it and all that stuff. And I basically did that. And now standard, you know, if there was like a PTQ on Arena or Moto or whatever that was standard, I would just not really want to play in it. But I would be down to play a modern event. And yeah, probably a lot of that and my lack of excitement in Magic as a whole probably stems from there being bad standard formats and me feeling like I have no agency. You know, it's like, oh, I could work pretty hard to have a 45% matchup against this deck or whatever. It's like, that's not really super exciting. You know, give me something.
Right there with you, brother.
Game.
Good luck.